Welcome back to another episode of Captain's Log, and today I'm going to talk about the ages of some of the Star Trek characters, specifically the original series. How old were they actually on the show? And I know it's been batted about that Captain Kirk was about 35 years old when he first appeared on the Enterprise. And well, today I did a little research and I actually found that information. And so let's begin with Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk was actually born, and it's well documented. In fact, I've been to his birthplace in Riverside, Iowa. He was born on March 22nd in the year 2233, which made him about 32 years old when he first appeared on Star Trek in the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before. Now, that wasn't the first episode shown, but it was quite obvious that when you saw it, it was of an early era, especially when you consider that it was the same uniforms almost that they showed in The Cage, which was the original pilot show of Star Trek. And so now he was 32 by the time of 2265, which was the date of the his first appearance as captain on the Enterprise. And now the series lasted for about three and a half years or so. So by the end of the series run, Kirk would have been about 35, 36 years old. And so anyway, now by the time of the Next Generation movie, the Generations, that would made him, let's see, about physically 60 years old, because that was Generations was set between the Star Trek Generations was set between the years 2293 and 2371. But so that was 2371, the events in the movie Generation, which would have made him about 60 years old physically. But by the time he came out of the Nexus, so technically, that made him about 138 years old chronologically, although not physically. So, whatever one you go by, since he died in Generations, it was 138 years after he was born, but physically he was only about 60 years old. Now, of course, I can't talk about how old Kirk was without talking about how old Spock was. And so Spock was born on the January 6th of 2230, so which would have made him actually physically 35 years old by the time he appeared on the show. So that was quite interesting to find out that Spock was really approximately Kirk's age when you first see them on the show, which was quite interesting because, I, like everybody else, we all know that Vulcans have a very long life on Earth, listen to me. And so when we first see Spock ever in Star Trek, he was about 35 years old. And now when he appears on the Next Gen series, he is actually, let's see, that was the shows that I'm talking about. The episodes are the Unifications parts 1 and 2, wherein he is actually an ambassador to the Romulan Empire, although a secret one. He's attempting to start the reunification process of the Vulcans and the Romulans. That is set in the year 2368, which would make Spock 138 years old by that time. And which, as I said, because he's a Vulcan, he got to live longer. Now by the time of the J.J. Abrams films, the Kelvin universe, since they included Leonard Nimoy as as Spock, Spock Prime, as it were, this was actually his final appearance in the Star Trek film, since he died just a few years after that. But Spock was, the story went that Spock was sucked into a black hole in the future from the year 2387 and sent back to the Kelvin timeline, which was in 2258. And so that would have made, 2387 would have made Spock 157 years old by the time he ended up in the Kelvin universe. And so in that timeline, he lived another 4 years, and that would have been made him Spock, that is 161 years old. So, and of course, rounding out the trio, the big trio in Star Trek, we have Dr. McCoy. Now, that Dr. McCoy was born in 2227, which would make him about 38 years old at the start of the original series, and 42 by the time it ends. Although in my mind, he actually looked older because, DeForest Kelley. But now, in DeForest Kelley's last appearance in Star Trek at all, the franchise, was of course, in the pilot episode of Next Gen, Encounter at Farpoint, where he made a cameo appearance. He's walking down the corridor with Data. In fact, that's still one of my favorite thoughts about Star Trek is, McCoy's encounter with Data, and his remarking about, "You don't have no pointed ears, boy." I love that, and watching Data's face going, "What are you talking about?" kind of thing. But anyway, back to Dr. McCoy's age. By the time he appeared in that episode, he actually ends up. Let's see, that's what, 2364. So he would actually be 137 years old at that point. Now, of course, we never see Dr. McCoy die, so that is speculation, can continue about how old McCoy actually was by the time he died. And if somebody can tell me what year that was, that would be great. Now, next, of course, is Scotty. Scotty, played by James Doohan. Let's see, research shows me that he was born in 2222, which would actually have made him older than the others. But being who he was happy being where he was, being the chief engineer of a starship, as he told Geordi in the show, the Next Gen episode of Relics. You'll never have a better time being the chief engineer of starship. So he was happy to be a lieutenant commander. And now this would have made him, since he was born in 2222, and by the time of the start of the original series, that would have made him 43. And by the time the series ended, he would have been 47. Now, I mentioned before that he appeared in the Next Generation episode of Relics. That was set in the year 2369. And thus, he would have been about 75 years old, because it was revealed in that episode he was on his way to the Northrop colony to retire. And so, but as the episode went, they crashed, the ship crashed on a Dyson sphere, and he managed to survive by rigging the transporter to continually run in a buffer mode, and he locked his pattern into the buffer mode. So that would added another 75 years onto his life. So, oh, I'm sorry. I just realized I miscalculated his age by the time he landed on the Dyson sphere, crashed rather. You would have been 72. Add another 75 years to that when the Next Gen crew pulled him out of the transporter. That would have made him about 147 at that time. And again, like Dr. McCoy, Scotty's death was never explored in Star Trek. So again, speculation on how old he actually would have been is up in the air when he died, that is. And so anyway, on to the next. And Uhura, Miyota Uhura. Sorry, my pronunciation is off a little bit. She was born in the year 2239, which would make her 26 years old by the time the original series started and 30 by the time it ended. And in the Next Gen, I'm sorry, not the Next Gen, but the motion picture, she was a lieutenant commander. Let's see, by the time Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, came about, she was 54 years old, and because that was set in the year 2293. Again, Uhura's death was never filmed, explored, mentioned in the franchise. So, but I did see her in a fan film made a few years later. She was a full captain. That one was set about 10 years after Kirk's death. It was entitled Of Gods and Men. It was set about 10 years after Kirk supposedly died in 2293. And since Uhura was 54 years old at that time in Gods and Men, that would have made her about 64 years old in that movie. And she was a full captain by that time. Now, next person I want to talk about is Sulu, played by George Takei. And research shows that he was born in 2237. And that would have made him 28 by the time the original series started, and also 32 at the end of the original series. He did appear in Star Trek Voyager, but that was a flashback episode. In fact, that was the name of the episode, was Flashback. Now, by the time his final appearance in the franchise in Star Trek 6, he would have been 56, making him about 2 years older than Uhura. And now, so again, his death was never explored, although it was revealed in the movie Generations that his daughter was the helmsman of the Enterprise B. And that was I liked that episode, or rather that movie, that scene where she is introduced to Kirk by Chekhov. The way Chekhov was looking, it seems to me there was more of a connection than just knowing she was Sulu's daughter. Again, I would assume Chekhov would have been like Demora's godfather or something like that, kind of an uncle type of relationship with her, the way he was looking. And so that was fun. And of course, can't talk about Sulu without talking about Chekhov. Now, he was the youngest one of the main crew, and he was born in 2245, which would have made him about 15 years or so younger than Kirk. Now, his first appearance on Star Trek was in 2266, the year, Star Trek year, which would have made Chekhov about 21 years old as an ensign, which is about right for an ensign, in any military organization or paramilitary organization. And so now by the time of the original series, I would have made him about, 23, 24 years old. But his last appearance in the Star Trek franchise, of course, was in the Generations movie. Since it was in the year 2293, that would have made him about 48 years old at that time. And so Janice Rand is next. She was born, according to research, in the year 2232. And so, let's see, that would have made her about, when she went to the academy, she was 18. And when she entered, was born 2232, she entered service, or she enlisted, or she became active duty, rather. That's what I was looking for, in the year 2249, which would have made her about 17, 18 years old. But when she first appeared on the ship, which was in the year 2266, that would have made her about, about 34 years old. So she was a yeoman. From what I understand, Janice Rand wanted to get away from, her upbringing, which, from what I understand, was rather harsh. So rather than go all the way through the academy, she opted to become an enlisted person, to get out in space, to escape and stuff. So that's why at 34, she was a yeoman. And next, of course, rounding out the original crew, I'm going to be talking about Christine Chapel. So hold on a second. All right, Christine Chapel. She was born, by my research, in the year 2237 in Cleveland, Ohio. Another city I'm going to have to visit sometime. She entered by the time of the you see her in Star Trek, and I'm not counting the appearance as number one, as Christine Chapel. She would have been, it was in the year 2266, and that would have made her about 29 at the beginning of the original series, and would have made her, by the time the series ended, about 31, 32 years old. And so since, she made numerous appearances in Star Trek, the Star Trek franchise. And although she didn't appear in the movie Star Trek VI, and she did appear in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, but by 2293, the year of Star Trek VI, she would have been about 50 some, 2293. Okay, so by the time of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Christine Chapel would have been about 54, 55 years old. And since that movie, Star Trek VI, was the last original series movie, and presumably she hadn't died, Christine Chapel hadn't died by that time. Speculation, I'm sure in some fan fiction, they would have explored her death, but since it was never explored in the franchise, who knows actually when she died. So by the end of the movie era for the original series, she was about 54, 55 years old.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away everybody knows your name. You wanna go where people know people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paper boy, evening TV. Did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me, please. This old world's confusing me. Clouds as mean as you've ever seen. Ain't a bird who knows you're true. Then a little voice inside you whispers, don't sell your dreams so soon. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a face of somebody who needs you. Everywhere you look, when you're lost out there and you're all alone, life is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look, and everywhere you
Okay, that's it for this week. Once again, thank you for watching, and may the great bird of the galaxy bless your planet.